Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
As she stepped onto the bus, the girl froze in shock. Sitting there as if nothing had happened was her husband, the man who had been declared dead a year ago. When he got off the bus, she followed him, but was left speechless when she saw that Alejandra nearly dropped her bag from the sudden tremor in her hands. At the far end of the bus, before her very eyes, stood her husband, the man thought to have died a year ago, whose loss she had mourned through sleepless nights. He was wearing his usual leather jacket, aged along with him over the past few years. He leaned against a handrail, staring out the window as if nothing were out of the ordinary, as if he didn't realize someone might recognize him. Alejandra was paralyzed with shock. Her heart pounded so hard that she couldn't hear the engine or the chatter of passengers. Her entire world shrank to a single image. Her husband, like a memory brought to life, was just a few steps away. Yet he wasn't looking in her direction and didn't seem to know she was on the same bus. Alejandra couldn't move, though people around her jostled and pushed, irritated as they tried to make their way down the aisle. The hum of voices, the scent of cheap perfume and gasoline mixed into a strange background noise that made her insides tighten with unease. This can't be happening. I saw the death certificate with my own eyes, held it in my own hands, visited the grave myself. The thoughts swirled in her head, feeding a rising horror. But the real shock came when he suddenly turned his head, as if he could feel her gaze. Alejandra recoiled and shrank behind a tall man, afraid her husband would spot her and vanish. Why was he here? Why wasn't he searching the bus for her face? A cold chill ran through her. Was it even him? Was her mind playing tricks on her? Grief and longing had betrayed her before. But something deep inside told her it was really him, her Matias, who had gone missing a year ago, his death officially confirmed. When the bus stopped and passengers began to get off, quietly pushing past one another, Alejandra noticed her husband preparing to leave as well. She had no time to think. Her legs carried her toward the exit on their own. She tried not to lose sight of him, weaving through the crowd. Her hair slipped from its tidy style, her heart pounded in her throat. She leapt onto the pavement, looked around. Her husband was walking quickly down a path leading to a nearby park. Alejandra rushed after him, forgetting all her plans for the day. Then, just as she caught up to him in a corner, the moment hit her like a blow. He stopped, raised his head, and Alejandra realized he must have heard her hurried steps. But Matias didn't turn toward her. He turned instead to a man standing at the edge of the park, half hidden in the shade of the plane trees. They exchanged a few brief words, and suddenly her husband handed the man an envelope, which he quickly tucked under his jacket. Looking around cautiously, the two men walked deeper into the park, leaving Alejandra behind at the end of the path. She couldn't believe this was real. Her husband was alive, walking the streets, meeting with some stranger in a park. And she, legally a widow, was forced to hide behind trees like someone chasing a ghost. But the question that tormented her, who is that man, and why hasn't my husband come home, pushed her to follow, even as her heart screamed for her to stop. She watched as Matias argued with the stranger, both of them glancing around. The man seemed to raise his voice. From the few fragments that reached her, Alejandra caught words about promises and deadlines, though the meaning remained unclear. Suddenly, the stranger raised a hand, as if threatening Matias. He flinched, then stepped closer himself, eyes burning with a mix of pain, fear, and determination. The scene looked more and more like a fight about to erupt, but at the last moment, both men stopped. Matias, breathing heavily, said something curt, then turned to leave. The stranger clenched his fists in fury but remained where he was, eventually walking off in the opposite direction. Alejandra sensed something dangerous and strange was going on, but couldn't grasp what exactly. She nearly ran toward him, about to call his name. But something held her back, the fear he would vanish again. His death had shattered her once, and the idea of reliving that pain was unbearable. So she decided to follow him instead. Matias exited the park, crossed the street. Alejandra saw a taxi stand nearby, but he didn't take a cab. He walked past parked cars, sticking close to the old houses lining the block. His pace quickened, and he looked back now and then, as if afraid someone might be following him. If he's afraid of being followed, then I have to be extremely careful, thought Alejandra. She crouched behind a parked delivery van and waited until her husband disappeared around the corner. A trembling seized her, and her heart pounded as if it were trying to escape her chest. There was no more doubt. This was no sleepless dream, no ghost, no look-alike. Only Matias, the Matias she remembered, could walk like that, look like that. Every movement of his echoed in her soul like a familiar chord. She kept following him on tiptoe, feeling like she had suddenly become the heroine of a spy story. With each passing second, more questions crowded her mind. Why hadn't he called? Where had he been all this time? Did he not care that she had mourned him, buried him, and lost all hope? Tears stung her eyes, but she forced herself to focus and keep going. Her husband turned into the courtyard of an old 3-story building, its walls covered in graffiti and worn by time. From a ground floor window came the smell of tobacco and old furniture. Someone was playing the radio loudly. Alejandra, cautiously hiding behind the corner, saw Matias pull out a key, glance around, and enter the building. The door slammed shut. She ran up and began to think how to get inside without running right into him. On one hand, she couldn't just barge in and risk a direct confrontation. On the other, she had to know the truth. Taking a chance, Alejandra tried the door handle. To her surprise, it wasn't locked. Perhaps the intercom had been broken for ages. She stepped into the dim stairwell and heard soft footsteps above. Matias was climbing, and the stairs creaked under his weight. Alejandra froze, letting him get ahead, then began quietly following. She saw him stop on the 3rd floor, in front of a door that clearly wasn't part of a new apartment. The paint was peeling, the doorframe cracked, and a pair of old shoes sat beside the threshold. He entered, and soon she heard the turn of a key in the lock. Alejandra wanted to go up to the door but was afraid he'd hear her. She stopped one landing below, crouched behind the banister, and held her breath, trying to catch any sound of conversation. At first, there was only silence, just the muffled sound of footsteps inside. Then suddenly, a woman's voice rang out. It was hard to make out the words, but the tone left no doubt. She was scolding him, angry and emotional. Then Matias responded, low, harsh, and clearly agitated. Alejandra was overwhelmed with confusion. Who is this woman to my husband? Why is he in her apartment? What is going on? She wanted to storm in and demand answers, but she knew a reckless move like that might scare him off for good. And the fear of losing him again, after all she had been through, held her back. She had no choice but to wait and listen. The conversation became more heated, and now and then fragments reached her. It seemed to be about some documents the woman demanded to see. She caught words like money, debt, danger, and something about can't take risks. Each broken phrase made Alejandra's anxiety grow. Matias seemed to be trying to stay calm, but there was a hint of pain or despair in his voice. Then the woman raised her voice and Alejandra heard clearly. Don't you dare use me as cover again. I'm tired of risking everything for you. The words dissolved into the noise of a window creaking open somewhere in the building. A sharp sting of jealousy pierced Alejandra. Has he been living with another woman all this time? Or is she an accomplice in something illegal? Suddenly, the door flew open and a woman around 30 stepped out, tugging on a windbreaker with jerky movements. Alejandra pressed herself against the wall, praying not to be seen. The woman muttered curses under her breath and quickly ran down the stairs. Alejandra almost forgot to breathe until the footsteps faded. Just moments later, another door slammed. This time, Matias came out of the apartment. He looked exhausted, his eyes filled with tension. He locked the door quickly, glanced at his watch, clearly in a hurry, and began descending. Seeing him approach, Alejandra pressed herself to the wall in desperation, hoping he wouldn't turn his head. He passed just a step away. For a moment, she thought he sensed someone nearby. He paused for half a second and glanced around, but didn't see her. Thankfully, the dim light helped her stay hidden. Then he continued down, and soon his footsteps faded below. The front door slammed, and silence settled again. With a heavy sigh, Alejandra rose, realizing she had missed another chance to speak to him. But even more, her resolve grew. She had to find out what was going on. If Matias was alive, he owed her an explanation. Alejandra descended the stairs after him and peeked into the courtyard. It was empty. He had disappeared again, so quickly that all she could do was guess where he'd gone. Tears welled in her eyes again, and her chest tightened with despair. She stepped out onto the street, glancing around in confusion, the old cars, the peeling fences, the passers-by who had no idea about her drama. A sudden wave of shame washed over her, for her helplessness, for not being able to stop him, to force him to explain. But what could a woman do, who had lost her husband a year ago and now found him in such a strange place? She wanted to run after him again, but he was already gone. So began a long day, filled with countless questions, fear, and a growing determination to uncover the truth. Alejandra knew she had to take action. Her life had been in a fog for a whole year, pain, loneliness, grief, and attempts to start over. But now, with her husband inexplicably alive, she refused to drown again in the chaos of silence and unanswered questions. Still, she had responsibilities she couldn't just abandon. At home, in the old apartment where she and Matias had lived before his death, her parents were waiting. They had moved in after the tragedy, unwilling to leave her alone in such a broken state. Her mother, well into her 60s, had taken the loss hard, and her father tried to be a pillar of strength, though he was suffering too. Upon hearing of the tragedy, they sold part of their property in another city and came to live with their daughter. And now, every day, she saw that unspoken question in their eyes: how do we go on? The memories of Matias were still too fresh. She was afraid that telling them what she'd seen today would spark dangerous new hopes. What if it was all a mistake? Or a deception? And yet, it felt wrong to hide it from them. Torn between doubt and instinct, she decided not to say anything for now. When she returned home, she found her mother warming up lunch and her father sorting through the mail. Some documents had arrived from a notary related to Matias's inheritance. Since his death certificate had been issued, the estate had been transferred to Alejandra, and some assets had gone by law to Matias's parents. There were still many stamps and bureaucratic hurdles, which exhausted the entire family. Now, the process of finalizing everything in Alejandra's name was nearly complete. The authorities had officially recognized Matias as deceased and were preparing the final report to record it all. How awful, Alejandra thought. To inherit everything when the person is still alive. But she said nothing out loud, just lowered her eyes and answered her parents' questions absent-mindedly. During lunch, the conversation once again turned to Matias. Alejandra's mother tearfully mentioned that she had run into his older brother the day before. He had admitted he still couldn't come to terms with Matias's death and was planning to organize a memorial service at church soon. Alejandra fell silent, unsure how to respond. Inside, everything was churning. What if I tell them I saw him, and they think I've lost my mind? But she pressed her lips together and said nothing. The silence of her secret weighed on her chest. After lunch, she went to her room, sat on the bed, and stared at her reflection in the mirror, unable to look away from her pale face. He's alive. What do I do now? The thought raced through her mind. She had no experience in situations like this. How could she? That night, lying awake, she remembered how she had met Matias many years ago. He had always been energetic, a little mysterious, never eager to share the details of his work. He would say he was involved in security projects. Once, during their first trip to the seaside, he had casually mentioned that he had complicated relations with some business partners, and that he sometimes had to hide portions of his income to avoid trouble. At the time, Alejandra brushed it off as male bravado, a way to sound impressive. But now, after what she had seen, those words took on a much darker tone. Had he gotten involved in something dangerous after all? His disappearance had always seemed strange. One evening, he had taken a call, packed quickly, and told her he had to leave urgently. He never came back. Later, she was told there had been a tragic incident involving fire. The body was said to be almost unidentifiable, but a DNA test had confirmed the relation. She trusted the report, it came from official sources, and everything seemed airtight. But now what? A forensic error? A forged result? And why? For a whole week after that encounter on the bus, Alejandra couldn't eat or sleep. She was lost in a whirlwind of contradictions. She tried to track Matias, hoping he'd appear again somewhere, but the days passed, and he seemed to vanish into thin air. Every time she boarded a bus, her eyes instinctively searched for that familiar silhouette. But it was useless. Then, just when she had almost given up, on about the 8th day, her friend Marta called. Marta had once worked as a secretary at their local police station. Her voice was urgent. She said they needed to meet right away because she had come across some strange information about Matias. Alejandra rushed to the meeting without hesitation. They met in a small cafe, where Marta told her that recently, several reports had come in about a suspicious man, one who closely matched Matias's description, and that he had been seen in the same park area where Alejandra had almost run into him. I immediately thought of your husband. Well, forgive me, I was sure he had died, but what if it was all a mistake? Marta said. Still, some of my colleagues acted really strangely when they heard about the resemblance, she added, her brows knitting in concern. So I dug through some files, but everything about him is either classified or access restricted. They won't explain anything, just say, stay out of it, unless you want trouble. I thought you should know. Alejandra froze. So she wasn't the only one who thought Matias might still be alive. That meant someone in law enforcement might already know the official story of his death was false. The thought was terrifying, but also strangely hopeful. Why would he fake his own death and then disappear? Alejandra wondered aloud. Could he really be in that much trouble? Marta shrugged. It looks like he's involved in something criminal. And maybe he's got some kind of protection, people who helped him vanish and made it look like he died. But that's just my theory. Alejandra fell silent, staring down at her now cold coffee. Her friend's news confirmed that what she had witnessed that day wasn't just her imagination. But what was she supposed to do now? In the following days, Alejandra swung back and forth, one moment ready to search for Matias, the next overcome by fear. What if she put herself, or her parents, in danger? And yet, she was torn apart inside by the desire to know the truth. If he was alive, why hadn't he reached out? The questions haunted her. At times, she regretted not running to him the moment she saw him on the bus, not grabbing his hand. But it was too late to go back. Echoes of conversations haunted her, the tense voices behind an apartment door, the heated exchange with the stranger in the park. Clearly, they'd spoken about debt, danger, and deadlines. Soon, strange rumors began to circulate around town. Some claimed they'd seen a man resembling Matias with suspicious-looking people near an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts. Others insisted they had friends who had spoken with him recently. Whispers spread. Some said he was an undercover agent and that his death had been part of a covert operation. Others murmured that he was on the run from the mafia or former associates. These urban legends only strengthened Alejandra's resolve to go to the police. But then she remembered Marta's warning, stay out of it if you don't want trouble. And the moment she considered filing a report, fear struck her. If powerful people were involved, who knew how this could end? To clear her mind, Alejandra decided to speak with people who had once been close to Matias, former colleagues at the small security company where he had worked with university friends, and his brother. She first visited Pablo, a close friend and former co-worker. Once inseparable from Matias, Pablo had distanced himself after the death, barely keeping in touch. At their meeting, Pablo looked anxious, avoiding her gaze. Listen, Sandra, I don't know what to tell you. I don't understand anything myself, he blurted out when she asked about Matias. About 6 months ago, some guy contacted me and started asking pointed questions. What was Matias doing? Who was he meeting with? And then he said, forget about him if you want to live in peace. Pablo looked like he wanted to forget, but his eyes flickered with fear and hidden resentment. You see, he went on, Matias had something going on the side. I never got involved, I figured it wasn't my business, but he was always hiding something. Just before he disappeared, he asked me to cover for him in case something went wrong. But he never told me what exactly. He just said, if anything happens to me, keep my flash drive safe and don't give it to anyone but me and then he mentioned some woman, can't remember the name exactly, maybe Estella or Ella. I was scared to keep it, but he left it with me, said he'd come back for it later. And then he vanished. Pablo paused, trembling slightly at the memory. And then some people came, searched my place. I panicked. Thought maybe it had drugs or spy data or something, so I destroyed it. Burned it. You burned it? Alejandra gasped, horrified. Now she understood, Matias had entrusted this man with something important, but it was lost forever. Pablo gave a bitter half-smile. Yeah, but believe me, otherwise they would have torn my apartment apart. I thought Matias was really dead, and none of it mattered anymore. I was scared for my own skin. After leaving Pablo, Alejandra felt even more shattered. So Matias really did have secrets, serious ones, if people like that were involved and destroying evidence. What had she gotten herself into? And yet, this only strengthened her conviction that this wasn't about some simple case of infidelity. No, it was something bigger, criminal, perhaps even tied to covert operations. But if that were true, why hadn't he contacted her? Didn't he understand how much she was suffering? Did he really think she could just accept it and move on? Soon after, Alejandra went to visit Matias's brother, Antonio, who had long since moved to a large house outside the city. He greeted her coldly, though they had always gotten along well in the past. Now, it was as if her presence burdened him, as though she were an unwelcome reminder of something he wanted to forget. Alejandra, why did you come? He said without inviting her inside. I don't know what to tell you about Matias. We've already discussed everything when we handled the inheritance papers. Clenching her hands, Alejandra tried to speak calmly. Antonio, this isn't about the inheritance. I saw Matias. He's alive. At her words, Antonio turned pale. He licked his lips, clearly trying to hide his nerves, and hissed. Don't say such nonsense. You don't know what you're talking about. Alejandra stared him down, unflinching. I know what I saw. And I know there's something very serious going on. Antonio tried to change the subject, launching into talk about his health, saying he didn't have time for ghost stories. But Alejandra held her ground. Antonio, he's your brother. If he's alive, we have to help him, find out why he's hiding. Antonio snapped, losing the last of his composure. You're the one who needs help, not me. I'm not getting dragged back into that mess. Do what you want, just don't say you weren't warned. She was shaking as she returned to her car. Warned? About what? Her heart pounded wildly. That means Antonio knows something. But he clearly didn't want to get involved. Alejandra realized that secrets were piling up all around her, and no one wanted to unravel them. But she was ready to go all the way. Still, could Matias be so dangerous that even his own brother recoiled at the mention of his possible return? Days passed. Alejandra kept searching. The uncertainty gnawed at her, yet she forced herself to maintain a facade of normal life. Her parents couldn't understand why she looked so pale, why she came home so late or left so early. She blamed it on work, saying she had too much to do, though in truth, she'd taken time off. Her intuition told her she needed to return to that building where she'd seen Matias, or try to find witnesses who could say where he had gone after meeting that mysterious woman. Eventually, Alejandra found the courage to return to the building, though she feared someone might notice her. Several times she entered the courtyard, watching who came and went, trying to ask around if a man named Matias lived there. But people eyed her suspiciously, brushed her off, or said nothing. She looked too nervous, and no one wanted to get involved. But on the third evening, she got lucky. An elderly woman approached the entrance with a bag of groceries. Alejandra ran to help her carry it and struck up a conversation. The woman said that a man matching the description had been seen in an apartment on the third floor, but that the flat officially belonged to someone named Peter, who lived there with some woman. She didn't know the details but admitted she'd seen Matias briefly. He always seemed on edge, like a hunted animal. This isn't the safest neighborhood, the old woman added. Alejandra asked if there was a way she might speak with the apartment's occupants. The woman shrugged. Hugo leaves early, comes back late. I'm too old to keep track of him. And the woman, his daughter, maybe? Or a girlfriend? No idea. Haven't seen them together in a while. Might be best to just wait. Sooner or later, someone's bound to show up. Alejandra realized she'd hit a dead end, but she still asked the old woman to let her know if the man she'd seen ever showed up again. The woman nodded and promised to help. Alejandra left her phone number, just in case. It all felt like some desperate gamble, but she didn't see another way. As she stepped out of the courtyard, she sighed bitterly. So Matias is alive, and yet here I am, practically combing alleyways to find him. The emptiness inside her was overwhelming. But the thought of going home empty-handed again felt unbearable. The next day, her phone rang. At first, she didn't recognize the voice. Alejandra, a flat voice asked. Yes, who is this? Her heart immediately dropped into her stomach. We met when you were watching Matias at that building. Alejandra nearly dropped the phone. Who are you? You saw me? There was a nervous chuckle on the other end. Let's meet. And don't do anything stupid, don't call anyone. Trust me, you don't need that right now. Then the line went dead. It felt like something out of a cheap detective novel, but she had no choice. If this mysterious man knew something, he might be the only one who could explain why her husband hadn't contacted her. A short message came through with the meeting location, a half-abandoned park on the outskirts of the old industrial zone. The address alone made her shudder. It was clearly not a safe place. But she couldn't back down. This was about her husband. She arrived at dusk, picking her way through sparse trees, eyeing the dark shapes of locked-up buildings. Every sound made her flinch, but she kept going, phone ready in her hand. At last, she saw a man in a hood sitting on a nearly collapsed bench. He gestured for her to come closer. No sudden moves, he warned, as if this were truly some criminal story. Alejandra walked up, doing her best not to show fear. Tell me, do you know something about my husband? The man hesitated, then pulled back his hood. It was the same stranger Matias had argued with in the park the day they briefly crossed paths. A fresh bruise bloomed on his cheekbone. I'm Raphael, he said. They told me you're looking for Matias. Well, he told me to warn you. He broke off, seemingly unsure whether to continue. Alejandra waited patiently, suppressing the trembling in her knees. Raphael muttered a curse under his breath and looked her straight in the eye. He said, stay out of it. This could end badly. But I get the feeling he doesn't actually want to hurt you. You're his wife, right? Yes, Alejandra replied, trying to sound firm despite the turmoil inside her. I'm his wife. And I have every right to know what's happened to him. Raphael shifted uneasily from foot to foot. Look, I'm not his friend. He owes me money. A lot. He's been dancing around it, promising he'll pay once his business is sorted. But whatever he's into, it's serious. Alejandra didn't understand what kind of business Raphael meant. He gave her a crooked smile. He didn't tell you everything about his income. There's smuggling involved. Other stuff too. I don't know the full picture, but I'm pretty sure he dragged all of us into a mess. He says he's about to get a big payout, then he'll settle up. I tried pressing him, but he warned me that if I push too hard, it'll backfire. Said I'd regret it. Alejandra felt the ground shift under her feet, smuggling large sums. Why did he fake his death? She asked in a near whisper. Raphael shrugged. Probably so certain people couldn't find him. I don't even know the whole story. He said there are people out there he owes a hell of a lot more than me. If they find out he's still alive, he's dead. Raphael's words cut like ice. So Matias had been running from someone far more dangerous than a debt collector. But why had he left Alejandra completely in the dark, drowning in grief, knowing she might go looking for him? Or did he think this was the only way to keep her safe? The questions kept multiplying. Raphael sighed. Look, I didn't want to get involved. But when I saw you following him, I realized he can't bring himself to reach out to you. Maybe he's scared for your life. Or maybe something else is going on. Either way, I'm done with this crap. I'll tell you straight, he said he's planning to leave the city. Probably will, if things don't go his way. Alejandra closed her eyes. He's leaving? He won't even say goodbye? Her chest tightened with pain and bitterness. Raphael, apparently reminded of his own interests, added, By the way, he said he left something for you in a certain place. Said that if you started searching seriously, I should pass it on. But I'm not sure I should tell you. I don't want to get into deeper trouble. Alejandra nearly shouted. Please, I beg you, if he left something for me, I need to know. Raphael sighed and stepped closer. Fine. There's an old auto repair shop by the highway. It's been closed for years. He said if you felt like you couldn't go on without answers, you should check there. It's not a safe place. There are squatters, junkies, local gangs. But according to Matias, there's a metal locker inside. You'll find an envelope with your name on it. I haven't gone there myself. I don't want to. But be careful. If there's something important in there, someone else might be looking for it too. A sharp wave of panic hit Alejandra. She felt an almost uncontrollable urge to rush there immediately. She knew it might be a trap, but the chance to finally uncover the truth was too much to resist. Raphael turned away, clearly uncomfortable with the entire conversation, and muttered his parting words. Listen, I've done my part, I warned you. From here on, it's your call. And let me be clear, I'm tired of waiting for my money. If I see your husband again, I'll be demanding payment. And if he doesn't pay, well. He didn't finish the sentence, but the threat in his voice was unmistakable. Alejandra pressed her lips together. Anger boiled inside her, but arguing with him here, in the darkness of the park, would be foolish. Raphael pulled his hood back over his head and disappeared into the shadows without another word. Alejandra exhaled deeply. She watched him vanish, realizing she now had a new address, a new lead. And with it, new risks. The next morning, she could hardly wait for her parents to leave for the store before heading to the old highway. The auto shop was just as described, half collapsed, rusting gates, a shattered sign reading closed, surrounded by garbage, broken windows, and crumbling walls covered in graffiti. The air inside smelled of damp and decay. It was clear no one had been here in a long time. Alejandra walked along the walls, careful not to step on broken glass. Peering into the dim interior, she saw old car lifts, broken tables, a chair with its stuffing spilling out. Every sound echoed loudly. Could he really have left something here? And why this place? The thought flashed through her mind. But she remembered Raphael's words and began searching for metal lockers. She found them against the far wall. Most of the doors had been torn off, and the shelves were empty. Alejandra checked them one by one, constantly glancing over her shoulder. In the third locker from the top, she found a small lock that had been forced open. Opening the door, she saw a crumpled envelope with her name scrawled on it in ballpoint pen. Could this be it? Her heart pounded. With trembling hands, she pulled out the envelope. Inside was a short note. Sandra, I never wanted you to suffer. When all of this is over, I'll tell you the truth. For now, please stay out of my business and be careful. Don't trust everyone who says they want to help you. Most are just looking for my weak spot. I'm sorry it has to be this way. Your M. As she read the note, Alejandra sank into a crouch, tears streaming down her cheeks. He had left her a message. He hadn't forgotten her. But why only this sparse note? No explanation, no address, no way to reach him. It felt like a message from another world, one where he lived in hiding or constant fear. But along with the note, there was also a small USB flash drive. It looked exactly like the one Pablo had described, only this one was intact. Apparently, Matias had made a backup of the one he gave his friend. This could be the key to everything. Alejandra hid the envelope and flash drive in her bag and bolted out of the auto shop, as if afraid someone might grab her by the collar. Only once she was outside did she think to check if she was being followed. But there was no one suspicious nearby. She hurried back into the city, heading to Marta, the only person she still trusted even halfway. Marta lived in a small apartment and, seeing Alejandra's frightened face, immediately locked the door behind her. "Oh my God, Sandra, what happened?" Alejandra pulled out the flash drive and briefly explained about Rafael, the letter, and what she had found. "I want to see what's on this flash drive." "Can we check it here?" she asked. Marta sighed, bit her lip nervously, but seeing the desperation on Alejandra's face, she agreed. She brought out her laptop, and they inserted the USB stick. Marta first scanned it for viruses, clean. On the drive, there was a folder containing several documents and a video file. The women held their breath and opened the documents first. It was a collection of scanned papers, names of various individuals, records of large wire transfers, copies of passports, and rough financial calculations. Alejandra didn't fully understand what she was seeing, but it was clear these were tied to major transactions. Marta kept scrolling. "It looks like black market accounting," Marta murmured, scanning the documents or records of smuggling transactions. "These sums, millions, maybe in dollars. If this is real, then Matias is clearly involved in some international scheme. Look, some of these names seem foreign." Alejandra, her hand trembling, tried to relate the contents to what she knew of her husband, but she had only scattered pieces. Then they opened the video file. It appeared to be covert footage, recorded in a garage. The poor quality made it hard to recognize faces, but Matias's voice was unmistakable. He was saying he was willing to move a certain shipment if he received part of the payment in advance, and that he couldn't risk being seen, as he was wanted in several regions. A rough voice responded, demanding guarantees. The conversation was tense, filled with swearing and threats. "Looks like a deal," Matias acting as a middleman, Marta whispered. "And someone set him up, forcing him to vanish." Seeing her husband clearly on the screen, Alejandra felt a wave of pain and relief. So he really was alive, hiding, entangled in something criminal. At the end of the video, Matias turned toward the camera and said, "There are people I trust. If something happens to me, this footage will come out." The video cut off. Alejandra closed the laptop, unable to watch anymore. "So that's why he faked his death," she whispered. "He's afraid of revenge or prison. Maybe both." Marta leaned back in her chair, thoughtful. "You need to take this to the police, Sandra. But understand, if this really involves dangerous people, it could get worse. I don't have access to high-level cases. And if Matias is undercover, you absolutely shouldn't interfere. But from that footage, it seems like he's working on his own, not as an agent. You might be caught in a criminal vortex." Alejandra clutched the flash drive tightly. "I need to find him again. Let him tell me face to face what will happen to me if this comes out. And why he didn't warn me sooner." The thought that the man who had sworn eternal love a year ago had left her behind without a word was unbearable. But realizing it was probably to protect her, she felt only pain and despair. Over the next 2 weeks, Alejandra tried repeatedly to contact Rafael to ask where to find Matias, but he never answered. She didn't dare visit dangerous areas alone. A few times, she summoned the courage to call Antonio, her husband's brother, but he either sent her to voicemail or answered coldly, claiming he knew nothing. It all felt like a dead end. Then, unexpectedly, came a new twist. One evening, the old woman from the courtyard called. "Sweetheart, I think I saw your friend. I was coming back from the market, and he went into that apartment you asked about. If you want to catch him, you'd better come quickly." Alejandra bolted from the house, flagged down a taxi, and was there in 20 minutes. The third-floor apartment, she knew it. As soon as she entered the building, she heard familiar voices. Matias. And the woman. They were arguing, clearly audible even through the door. Alejandra swallowed hard. Her heart pounded so fiercely it echoed in her ears. She wanted to burst in, but fear of the unknown made her pause to listen. Fragments of the conversation drifted through the door. You promised to leave. I can't keep waiting. If this gets out, we're finished. The woman was clearly on edge. Matias responded, voice low but desperate. I know. I just need a little more time until the deal is done. Then he trailed off. Alejandra pressed her ear to the door, holding her breath. The woman continued. Do you understand your wife could expose us? I don't want to run into her. Why did you leave her that envelope? You knew she'd find it. Matias snapped. She's not to blame, all right? I'll make sure she stops digging. Let her think I'm leaving the country. Alejandra nearly gasped aloud. So he knew she was on his trail. And he deliberately tried to mislead her, to keep her safe. Her hands trembled with a mix of rage and grief. How could he? Her mind screamed, but she held herself back. Because then Matias said something else. Don't forget, we're both in this deep. And if they catch us, it's over. That's enough. I have to go, they might be watching me. Then came the sound of footsteps approaching the door, and Alejandra didn't have time to move away. The door flew open, and she froze, staring into the eyes of her husband, who also stood stunned in the doorway, a small backpack in his hand. His face twisted in shock, and the woman behind him gasped. A second of silence felt like an eternity. Matias moved as if to slam the door, but Alejandra cried out. No, you're not running away this time. She grabbed his arm, tears bursting from her eyes. Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you explain? Why did you let me suffer for a whole year? Matias was breathing heavily, dark circles under his eyes revealing sleepless nights. He pressed his lips together, then finally said, Sandra, not here. No questions here. It's dangerous. But she didn't let go of his hand. No, Matias. I won't leave until I hear at least part of the truth. The woman appeared in the doorway behind him. She needs to go. Or I'll call people who'll take care of this, she said, her voice cold and full of threat. Alejandra involuntarily stepped back, shocked by the menace in her tone. Matias didn't turn around but snapped. Shut your mouth, Irene. Alejandra's hands fell to her sides. Irene. So that was the name of the woman living here. Now she knew who the rival was, or partner in her husband's murky dealings. The noise drew a neighbor from downstairs. Hey, everything okay up there? Keep it down. Matias shot him a dark look, realizing a scene would attract too much attention. Suddenly, he grabbed Alejandra by the shoulder and whispered, Come downstairs. We'll talk. Then, more loudly, Irene, wait here. Alejandra felt herself trembling but followed him. Outside, in the half-lit courtyard, they stopped. Matias looked around cautiously, then said quietly, Sandra, I know you've been looking for me. But you have no idea what kind of danger you've walked into. I can't come home. I faked my death to protect you, so the people I owe wouldn't come after you. Irene's helping me. Don't think this is about Raphael. It's not. We're tied together by business. And he stopped, as if afraid to say too much. Alejandra cut him off. I don't care about her. Just tell me, why did you decide I should be left alone in grief and uncertainty? Why didn't we run away together? Didn't you trust me? He ran a trembling hand through his hair. Try to understand, I got involved in serious criminal operations. I thought I could make money, build us a future. But everything went wrong. When I realized I might be killed, I staged it so it would look like I was dead. The plan was to disappear quietly so they'd stop hunting me. But I underestimated them. They found out I might have evidence, leverage. Now they're looking for me, though they're still not sure I'm alive. I've been hiding ever since. Sandra, if I had come to you right away, they'd have targeted you too. I thought if I vanished, he trailed off, his face twisted in pain. You thought I'd get over your death more easily than the real danger. Alejandra gave a bitter laugh through her tears. I nearly lost my mind. And now that everything's come out, what, are you going to disappear again? Matias shook his head, fear etched into his eyes. The situation's changed. I owe a huge amount I can't repay. My only option might be to make a deal with some people who want out of the country. If I help them, they might let me live and settle the debt. I don't know how it will play out. What matters now is that they can't find out you know anything. But they might suspect already. Alejandra flared with anger. I do know everything. I have the flash drive, your files, the video. Matias froze, grabbing her by the shoulders. You found it? No, damn it. She saw terror spread across Matias's face. He looked straight into her eyes. Sandra, for God's sake, give me the flash drive. It's dangerous. That's what they want to kill me for. If they find out it's with you, your life will be at risk. She felt paralyzed. All the pain she had bottled up for a year threatened to explode from her in a scream. Then why did you leave it for me if it's so dangerous? He let out a heavy sigh. I was afraid that if something happened to me, you could at least use it to negotiate your safety with the police or someone willing to protect a witness. I hoped you'd figure it out. Sandra, believe me, I never meant for this to get so out of control. Alejandra felt like everything inside her was on fire with contradiction. On one hand, he had tried to protect her, on the other, he had handed her a ticking time bomb. And only now was it truly clear how Matias had lived the past year, drowning in fear, constantly looking for a way out. But the hurt didn't go away. What are you going to do now? Run again? She asked. Matias glanced toward the building, where Irene was probably still watching from above, ready to intervene. I have a plan, he said quietly. I met someone who can get me forged documents. If I leave the country, the suppliers will stop looking for me. I'm going to try to repay the debt by handing over some information. It's the only way to survive this. But now that you know I'm alive, you could be in danger too. Alejandra swallowed the lump in her throat and whispered, and I'm not part of this new life of yours? You're just going to leave me here? He hesitated, then said bitterly, Sandra, if I take you with me, you could die. Or worse. These people don't play games. I have to finish this alone. If everything works out, maybe we'll have a chance. But not now. I don't want anything bad to happen to you. Alejandra was torn between shouting, "Take me with you," and her fear of the unknown. Tears streamed down her face. Then a raspy voice broke the silence. Irene leaned out from the building. Matias, enough already. We have to go. We're pushing our luck. She's a grown woman, she'll figure it out. Alejandra shot her a furious look. Of course. So you've been with him all along. You're the one I saw in the apartment. Irene scoffed. If you must know, I helped him pull off one deal. Nothing personal. Your domestic drama doesn't interest me. Matias scowled. Irene, shut up. You're not helping. A tense silence followed. Alejandra realized that if he walked away now, she might never see him again. Gathering her strength, she said, Matias, I won't let you just disappear again. I'll find a way to help you. And I'm keeping the flash drive, for now. If they come after me, I may have to use it. She hadn't even expected to say it out loud. A flicker of something, fear or admiration, flashed in Matias's eyes. He lowered his voice. Listen, Sandra, this isn't a game. Fine. Keep the flash drive for now, but hide it well. For God's sake, Don't take risks. I'll contact you if I can. That's all. Goodbye. He gently touched her shoulder, squeezing it, and for a moment Alejandra thought he might hug her. But he pulled away immediately, as if afraid that closeness would become his weakness. Irene tugged his arm sharply. Come on, we're out of time. Matias turned to her one last time. Take care of yourself, Sandra. I never meant. But he didn't finish. He turned away, quickening his pace, and disappeared around the corner with that strange woman. Alejandra stood in the damp night air of the courtyard, her heart pounding as she realized everything had become even more tangled. When she returned home, she nearly collapsed from nervous exhaustion. Her parents were alarmed. She looked sick, pale, with dark circles under her eyes. Her mother pleaded, Sandra, please tell us what's going on. You can't keep doing this to yourself. But Alejandra, too drained to explain anything clearly, just replied that everything was fine. A day later, she couldn't hold it in anymore and told her father part of the truth. Without going into criminal details, she admitted that Matias was alive, but involved with dangerous people, and that he had asked her not to tell anyone for now. Her father was stunned. He said that as soon as Matias resurfaced, they needed to go to the police, or at least to a lawyer. But Alejandra knew they didn't have much influence, and if the group Matias had tangled with was powerful, then bribery and corruption likely reached every level. A police report could trigger an even greater threat. Meanwhile, events took their own course. One night, she received a call from an unknown number. When she answered, there was only heavy breathing on the line, no voice. She hung up, trembling with fear. Sleep became impossible. Her mind raced with the thought that maybe they were already tracking her. The next morning, she found a crumpled note slipped under the door. Stay out of what doesn't concern you. Death is near. No signature, nothing, just that chilling sentence. Alejandra realized she was now in real danger. Matias's enemies had found her trail and were trying to scare her off. The ground seemed to sway beneath her feet, but instead of fear weakening her, her resolve hardened. I won't run from my own fate, she whispered to herself. One question echoed in her mind, where are you, Matias? She felt an urgent need to take action. Following Marta's advice, she went to see a lawyer known for taking on difficult cases. Of course, she didn't reveal everything, but she told him she had compromising material and feared for her life. The lawyer, a reserved man in his 40s, listened carefully and offered, if you have serious evidence, you may qualify for the witness protection program. But for that, we'd need to go through official law enforcement channels. Are you ready for that? Alejandra hesitated painfully. Matias had asked her not to expose anything, fearing it would trigger worse consequences. But now her life was hanging by a thread, and his, too. Her nerves were stretched to the breaking point. Then, the next day, came another unexpected turn. Irene called. Her voice was tense, irritated, and slightly panicked. Listen, I don't owe you anything, but Matias is missing. I haven't seen him in 2 days. We were supposed to leave together, but he never showed. I thought maybe he went to you. Alejandra felt her heart stop. Missing. No, he hasn't come to me. I don't know anything more. Irene exhaled heavily on the other end. Fine. If he doesn't show by tomorrow, I'm handling it my own way. Alejandra asked what she meant, but Irene hung up. Her mind spun. What had happened? Had he been caught? Or had he run again? Sleepless nights returned. The fear crept in again. All she could do now was wait for news, but waiting was the worst torment of all. She told her parents only that she was having problems at work. She called the lawyer to say she was not ready to go to the police just yet. Marta tried to calm her, sometimes staying the night so Alejandra wouldn't be alone. But on the third day, when the anxiety was almost unbearable, her phone rang again. This time, it was Rafael. He spoke as though someone might be listening. Listen, your husband's in trouble. I heard someone caught him in one of the safe houses. They're holding him, trying to force him to hand over some documents or compromising files. But he's not talking. Refuses to give them anything. I guess he'd rather risk it than give up the flash drive. Do you still have it? Alejandra almost dropped the phone. Adrenaline surged through her. Yes, I have it. Where is he? How do I save him? But Raphael hissed through the phone. Don't yell. I don't know the exact address, but they say it's a warehouse outside the city where they're planning to do a deal. I'll check and get back to you. But understand, if you go through with this, you're putting yourself at serious risk. You'd be better off staying out of it. Alejandra sobbed. I can't. If I don't save my husband, my life won't mean anything anymore. Raphael was silent for a moment. All right, I'll give you the location, but from that point on, you're on your own. He hung up. A couple of hours later, he called back and gave her a rough location. An old warehouse, an abandoned logging depot. But don't even think about charging in alone. They don't mess around. Alejandra thanked him and thought about the lawyer. Maybe now was the time to gather everyone she could and go with the police, but that would surely expose everything about Matias, his criminal ties, and he could end up in prison. But if she didn't go, he might be killed, and that was far worse. She realized she had no choice. This was about the life of the man she still loved. She gathered her courage, even though her knees were trembling. Within an hour, after consulting Marta, who, to her surprise, agreed to help, they drove out to the location in Marta's car. Alejandra warned her friend. Wait in the car. If I don't come back in half an hour, call the police. Marta, pale with fear, promised she would. The warehouse was surrounded by a high, rotting fence. The main gate was locked, but on the right side, Alejandra found a hole in the wire mesh. She slipped through, trying not to make a sound. Ahead were covered hangars. Inside, it was dark, damp, and dusty. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her temples, but she pressed on, holding a small pocket flashlight, which she barely turned on. Soon, she heard male voices. Behind a tall partition, she saw a faint glow. Holding her breath, she crept closer and peered through a crack between the boards. In the dim light, she saw several men, 2 of them armed. And on a chair, hands tied, sat Matias. His head was hanging, his face bruised. He's alive. Just need to get there in time, flashed through her mind. One of the men, clearly the leader, was barking orders. We're taking him to the deal. He needs to hand over the files. He claims he didn't give the flash drive to anyone. But we know he could have stashed it somewhere. Matias muttered. I don't know where it is. Maybe it burned. I've got nothing for you. The leader struck him across the face. Don't lie. We heard your wife still digging into your business. Don't tell me you didn't involve her. Matias gasped for air. She doesn't know anything. I've been dead to her for a long time. He bowed his head, barely holding on, but he wasn't giving in. Alejandra wanted to rush in and scream, but she knew she'd be no match against guns. Now wasn't the time. Then the door creaked open, and 2 more people walked in, Irene and a broad-shouldered man. Irene looked tense. She ran toward Matias. What did you do to him? I told you he'd cooperate if you gave him time. Why beat him? The boss narrowed his eyes. You're interested now? Heard you 2 were planning to skip town. That's not happening. First, we squeeze all the data out of you. Irene shrieked. I don't know any data. He never shared it with me. The boss laughed cruelly. Oh, really? We thought you were in on it. Or maybe you planned to sell us out. Trust me, I keep everything under control. We need both of you. Irene stepped back, terrified. The big man next to her reached toward his belt, something metallic flashed. A knife, perhaps? Alejandra's breath caught in her throat. The situation couldn't be worse. Matias, tied up and beaten, Irene cornered, and armed thugs all around. Then one of the guards turned to the boss and said, "Boss, there's a car by the gates. It looks like a patrol. Could be a raid." The leader swore. "Check it out. I don't want any surprises." 3 of the men left for the courtyard. Alejandra realized this might be her chance. The situation was slippery, but if it really was the police, they might take everyone down. Still, her heart whispered, what if Marta got scared and called them? She didn't know what was better. Only one thing was clear: she had to find a way to get Matias out of this trap. While she hesitated, those who remained grew more aggressive with their interrogation. "You know what's going on," one of them said, pointing a gun at Matias. "Without the flash drive and the files, you're dead. Now talk. Who else is involved?" Matias stayed silent, grimacing from pain. Summoning her courage, Alejandra slipped away from behind the partition and crept toward a row of metal shelves, hoping to find a pipe or bar, anything to create a distraction. Just then, she noticed Irene also trying to make a move. Alejandra's eyes followed her hand as it subtly reached toward her pocket, but one of the gang members spotted it. "Stop! What's in your pocket?" he barked. Irene obediently raised her hands. "Nothing. Just cigarettes." He forced her to empty her pockets, then checked for himself. Irene looked at Matias, panic in her eyes, clearly fearing they might be killed just for trying to use a phone. Meanwhile, noises came from outside. Whoever had arrived at the gate was causing a stir. There were loud shouts, curses, possibly even a fight breaking out. The leader ordered one of his men to stay with Matias and took the others with him outside. "Watch them," he growled, pointing at the prisoners. "Make sure they don't run." The guard nodded, gun in hand. Alejandra felt like she couldn't breathe. Now there were only 2 enemies left, the armed guard and the bulky man who had arrived with Irene. Maybe he was part of the gang, maybe not. Either way, the others seemed to trust him. Suddenly, Irene seemed to make a desperate move. She feigned a fainting spell and collapsed to her knees. The guard frowned and stepped closer to check on her. In that instant, the big man lunged for him, trying to grab the gun. A scuffle broke out. The guard fired into the air, the bullet ricocheting off a metal beam. Matias stirred, but with his hands tied, he couldn't help. Alejandra seized the chaos. She darted from behind the shelves, swinging an old iron pipe she'd found on the floor. She struck the guard's arm with all her strength. He screamed, and the pistol flew from his hand. The strong man lunged for it. "No!" Irene cried out. The guard, trying to recover, reached for the weapon, but the man tripped him and sent him crashing to the concrete. Alejandra, not taking her eyes off him, grabbed the pistol. Her hands were shaking. She didn't know how to fire, but hoped the threat alone would be enough. "Don't move," she shouted. The guard, wide-eyed, squirmed in the man's hold. His hand or fingers looked broken. He writhed in pain. Irene rushed to Matias and began untying his hands. Alejandra covered them, barely staying on her feet from nerves. Once Matias was freed, Irene stepped back, and he slowly got to his feet, swaying. "Sandra, you're here," he breathed in stunned disbelief, his head falling forward from exhaustion. Irene tried to support him under the arm, helping him walk. The strong man, now holding the gun with steady hands, nodded to Alejandra. "Let's go. Back exit, before they come back. Hurry." Alejandra glanced down at the guard on the floor. "What about him?" The man was trying to crawl away, clearly unable to pursue them. The strong man answered coldly. "Forget him. He'll call for backup, but we'll be long gone by then." At that moment, shouts and gunfire erupted from outside. It became clear that a real confrontation was happening. Alejandra, supporting the barely walking Matias, ran after Irene and the strong man. They rushed through the warehouse via a dark corridor, kicked open a back door, and stumbled out into an overgrown path. Pushing through thorny bushes, they burst onto a dirt road. In the distance, they could see the lights of vehicles and hear the wail of sirens. Someone had indeed arrived, and it sounded like a gunfight had broken out. Reaching Marta's car, which was waiting at the bend, Alejandra helped Matias into the back seat. He could barely stand. The strong man and Irene climbed in as well. Marta, pale as a sheet, slammed the gas pedal, and the car sped off. All five remained silent. Only Matias's labored breathing could be heard. When the warehouse was far behind them, Alejandra leaned against her husband. He was alive. Irene reached out to check Matias's pulse, but Alejandra did it herself. "He's conscious, but he's in bad shape. We need a doctor," she said. Irene's voice trembled. "I know. He's in shock, probably a concussion, and some serious bruises. But if we go to the hospital, we'll be spotted. I know a doctor who works privately." Marta quickly asked for the address, and they drove there. Once inside the apartment of the trusted doctor, they gently laid Matias on a couch. The doctor treated his wounds, hooked up in four, and ordered rest. Irene gave him water. Alejandra's heart felt heavy, seeing her husband and this woman working together with such practiced coordination stung. Clearly, they had been through a lot together. But now was not the time for jealousy. All that mattered was his recovery. The doctor confirmed there were no broken bones, just bruises and extreme stress. Matias needed a few days of bed rest. Marta, overwhelmed by what she had witnessed, struggled to hold back tears. For her, this felt like a nightmare movie. The strong man, who had introduced himself as Jose, stood on the balcony, smoking and watching the road. Irene sat at Matias's bedside. Alejandra walked over too, gently touched his hand, and whispered, "I'm here." Matias opened his eyes, looked at her, and said nothing, but his gaze held pain and gratitude. Then he slipped back into a half-conscious sleep. While the doctor tended to Matias, Irene pulled Alejandra aside. "Listen," she began. "I know you're angry at me. But believe me, your husband and I, we're not lovers. We were thrown together by this criminal mess. I got involved and couldn't get out. He's my only chance of surviving. We were going to leave once it was over. But Matias kept stalling, saying he had to make sure they wouldn't find you." Alejandra thought about her words. So, Matias had been protecting her all along, and Irene was helping him hide because she was in it, too. "So, it was just business between you?" Alejandra asked, unable to hide her suspicion. Irene gave a crooked smile. "You don't have to believe me, but there's no romance between us. I ran out of feelings long ago. Now it's just about staying alive." By the next day, Matias's condition had stabilized. But they all realized it was too dangerous to stay there much longer. They didn't know how soon the gang might pick up their trail again. A decision had to be made. The strong man, Jose, suggested they flee the country immediately. "I have fake IDs. I can get more. We just need time and money," he said. Alejandra's first thought was, "What about me? I'm being hunted now too. I'm part of the escape." Matias responded weakly, "She's coming with me. We're all leaving together. That's the safest way." Alejandra's heart jumped. Her old life was truly over. What would happen to her parents? How would she explain her disappearance? But staying was deadly. If they caught her alone, they could use her as leverage to get the flash drive. Still, another idea began to take shape. Maybe we should give the flash drive to the police, let them take down the whole network. But Matias hesitated. "You don't understand. These people aren't just petty criminals. They have connections. Some in the police have been on their payroll for years." The argument was heated. Alejandra finally let all her emotions spill out. "Matias, you've been dead to me for a year, and for what? Just to keep running forever? What about our parents, our families, your brother?" Matias responded in a strained voice. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I just don't see another way out. If they find out you've disappeared, they might go after your parents. We have to do this carefully." As they argued, Irene proposed a compromise to fake not only Matias's death, but Alejandra's too, so everyone would believe they both died in a tragic accident. Jose, she said, would help them cross the border with new identities. "I've already spoken to people who handle these kinds of things. For a lot of money," Irene began. "If we fabricate the documents and produce bodies from an unrelated accident, say, a car crash." But Marta immediately objected. "This is insane. You can't play with other people's bodies like that. It's a sin. And I doubt it would even work." Alejandra herself felt sick at the thought. But Irene insisted that, in the criminal world, this was a common tactic if you really wanted to disappear. After that, you lived under a new name somewhere far away. But Alejandra suddenly paused. Was running away and hiding like criminals really the right thing? What if there's a way to clear Matias's name? To work with the authorities and try to bring down the real bosses? Maybe if he gives them the flash drive and tells them everything, he could get a reduced sentence or some kind of deal. But Matias shook his head. "Sandra, this isn't a Hollywood movie. They'll leak my name to the people they're connected with. They won't protect me, they'll kill me. And maybe you too." She understood the grim logic in his words. This wasn't a fairy tale. But how could she abandon her parents? The inner struggle consumed her for 2 days while Matias slowly recovered. During that time, he gradually told Alejandra everything that had happened over the past year. How he'd been forced into smuggling illegal cargo. How a shipment went missing and he ended up owing a massive debt. How, when he realized they might kill him, he faked his death, bribing a corrupt coroner to falsify the DNA report using another victim from a fire. He had been hiding on the outskirts ever since, trying to repay his debt, but only got further entangled in illegal schemes. Irene had become trapped in it too, and when the pressure grew unbearable, they had no choice but to rely on each other. "I thought I could end it quickly," Matias said with a bitter sigh, "and then return your life to you, like none of this ever happened." Alejandra listened, torn by a storm of emotions: love, anger, disappointment, pity, and the desperate desire to save him. At night, lying beside him in the room they rented from the doctor, she couldn't bring herself to leave him, not like this. And in his sleep, he would reach out for her, clutching her hand, as if afraid she might disappear. On the 3rd day, Irene returned with forged passports. "Jose says there's a brief window, just a few days, when we can slip across the border unnoticed. After that, security tightens, and we might be too late." When Matias was able to stand, he said, "Sandra, we have to go. If you want to stay, that's your choice. I understand. It's dangerous and terrifying. But I have no other option. I've messed up too much." Alejandra looked him in the eyes. "And what about my parents?" He said nothing, lowering his gaze. Irene stepped in. "If you tell them the truth, they might slip up. What if they're being watched? Then everything falls apart. It's better if they think you simply disappeared. That way, they won't be dragged into this." Alejandra trembled with horror. Her parents wouldn't survive the loss of their daughter after already losing their son-in-law. Irene seemed to understand how cruel it sounded, but there was no other way. "Maybe, once things settle down, you can find a way to let them know you're alive. But right now, no contact." Tears streamed down Alejandra's cheeks. Matias, his face dark with emotion, simply placed a hand on her shoulder. Marta was crying too, saying it was madness. But she understood there seemed to be no other path to safety. Still, the risk loomed large. The whole plan could collapse at any moment. Alejandra's soul ached at the thought of leaving her parents in confusion and grief. But she loved Matias, and now she couldn't walk away. Deep inside, she held on to the hope that one day, when the danger passed, she would find a way to explain everything to her family. Everything pointed to a final decision. That evening, just as they began packing and preparing their fake documents, Alejandra's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. She answered, and a quiet, stifled female voice said, "Alejandra? I'm an emergency doctor. Your mother is with us. It looks like she's having a heart attack. We're taking her to the hospital. Everything went dark before Alejandra's eyes. My mother, she gasped. Her heart clenched with guilt and fear. Is she going to live? She blurted out. The doctor explained that her condition was serious, but there was still a chance. Pale as a sheet, Alejandra ended the call. I can't leave now. I have to go to her, she said firmly. Matias cursed under his breath. They were on the brink of escape, and if she showed up at the hospital, she might draw attention. But Alejandra said, I have no choice, Matias. If my mother is dying, I need to be there. Irene protested, warning they could be spotted. But Alejandra stood her ground. Then Matias clenched his jaw. Fine. We'll do it quickly. I'm coming with you. Irene grabbed her head in disbelief. You're both insane. They'll find you in no time. Jose added that the hospital would likely have cameras, security, ID checks. But when Alejandra looked at them, they all fell silent. You can leave without me, she said firmly. But I won't go without knowing how my mother is. Matias sighed and took her hand. Then we'll find a way. That night, together with Marta, they drove to the hospital, trying to stay unnoticed. Irene and Jose remained hidden in the back of the car, ready to drive off at a moment's notice. Alejandra entered her mother's room. She lay under and for, pale, but alive. Her father sat beside her. When he saw Alejandra, he jumped up. Sandra, where have you been? I didn't know what to do, your mother just collapsed. Something's really wrong. Alejandra, her throat tight with emotion, lied and said she had been out on urgent business and rushed back as soon as she heard. She leaned over and pressed her cheek to her mother's hand. Tears streamed down her face. Her mother opened her eyes slightly and whispered, Sweetheart, I was so scared. I thought I'd never see you again. After Matias died, life became so empty. Alejandra bit her lip to stop herself from blurting out the truth. When her father left to fetch the doctor, she leaned down and said, Mom, please hang on. I need you. I'm begging you, get better. Her mother replied weakly, Of course, darling. I'll hold on. You're all I have. At that moment, footsteps echoed in the hallway, and a man in a leather jacket appeared in the doorway. He might have been a guard or just a visitor, but he looked straight at Alejandra. Her heart clenched. Could he be one of them? The man walked past in silence, but she felt his gaze linger. She knew she had to go. Had someone followed her? Bending to her mother once more, she whispered through tears, Forgive me. I have to go, just for a little while. I'll come back, if I can. Her mother looked at her questioningly but was too weak to speak. Alejandra kissed her forehead and hurried out into the hallway. Her father was waiting. Where are you going? Can't you wait for the doctor? But she replied that she was going to get medicine and would return. It was too dangerous to stay. She ran from the hospital, and just outside, Matias called out softly, Sandra, hurry. I saw someone suspicious. He might have been watching you. Marta was already waiting in the car with Irene and Jose. Everyone was on edge. When Alejandra climbed into the back seat, she burst into tears. How can I leave when my mom is in that condition? Matias said nothing, just held her close. Marta, wiping her own tears, started the engine. Are we sure we're going now or not? Irene turned around in panic. We're going, before we're completely surrounded. Head bowed, Alejandra knew she had to choose now. Either leave her family and flee with her husband to save her life, or stay and risk everything, including his. She looked at Matias, his face gaunt and worn from the last few days, but still full of resolve. He was waiting for her decision. Suddenly, something clicked in her mind. If I don't go now, I betray my love. But if I go, I betray my parents and my own moral compass. Tears choked her, But she made her choice. Let's go. I have no other choice. I hope my mom recovers, and maybe, once everything settles, I'll find a way to let them know I'm alive. Thus began their escape. The 5 of them headed toward the border, where fake documents awaited them. The journey was long and tense. They switched cars multiple times, afraid they were being tracked. They avoided main roads, traveled down dirt paths, and stayed in cheap motels, trying to remain invisible. Alejandra was restless, constantly thinking about her mother. This might be her last day living legally in her home country. Matias tried to comfort her, murmuring, "I believe we'll come back when all of this is over." Irene and Jose stayed busy making calls, checking if the way ahead was clear. Marta, who had decided not to cross the border with them, still accompanied them to a certain point to help and say goodbye. It was all so risky that Alejandra could hardly believe they would survive. But at one checkpoint, their car was stopped. A police officer asked to see their documents. Irene, driving, handed over her fake passport. Matias and Alejandra prepared theirs under new names. Marta, nervously smiling, said they were headed on a sightseeing trip, and Jose pretended to be a foreigner who barely spoke Russian. The officer studied the passports for a long time, checking something, and asked where they were headed. Irene calmly replied they were tourists. Alejandra feared her eyes might give away the lie. But finally, the officer returned the documents with a curt, "Fine. Drive carefully." With a flood of relief, they continued on, nearly fainting from the stress. 3 hours later, they reached the agreed location where Marta would part ways with them. At the roadside, they hugged tightly. Marta cried, begging Alejandra to be careful, promising to tell her parents that she had left on a business trip, though for how long, she couldn't say. Alejandra knew it wasn't much comfort, but it was something. After saying goodbye to Marta, the 4 fugitives switched cars again, using one arranged by Jose's contacts. Down a bumpy road, they neared the border, where Jose claimed the path was clear and secure. But as they approached, they spotted a suspicious SUV parked with its headlights off. "Are those our people?" Irene asked quietly. "Looks like an ambush," Jose muttered, slamming the car into reverse. But before they could turn back, armed men leapt out of the SUV. A chase began. Alejandra's heart pounded. Matias, still weak, crouched in the back seat, watching the window. Irene shouted, "They found us!" Jose cursed and floored the gas. Bullets whizzed past. The car jolted over potholes, the suspension creaking. Alejandra clung to Matias, convinced this was the end. But suddenly Jose swerved onto a side path, weaving through trees, and their pursuers were left behind. 5 minutes of mortal terror, and then silence. It seemed they had escaped. Apparently, the attackers, gang members, or corrupt agents had been tracking them, but luck was finally on their side. At last, late at night, they managed to cross the border. Exhausted as if from war, they stopped at a rundown hotel on the outskirts of a small town on the other side. Irene and Jose began making calls to arrange the next steps. Matias, drained, lay down on the bed. Alejandra sat beside him. "We're across the border," she whispered. He sighed. "Yes. But we're still not free. We'll have to keep moving, change places, documents, identities, find a way to start a new life. Otherwise, they'll track us down." Alejandra understood this was just the beginning of their exile. She stroked Matias's hair gently. "Matias, I beg you, don't disappear from my life again. I don't care what happens, as long as I'm with you. But don't you ever leave me again, do you hear me?" Matias pulled her close and whispered, "Forgive me, Sandra. For everything." The days dragged on in an endless thread of uncertainty. They had already switched several cities, trying to cover their tracks. Occasionally, Alejandra received snippets of news from home. Marta called using encrypted apps. Her mother was recovering, which was a huge relief. But everything else remained dark. Her father was still searching for her, but Marta convinced him that Alejandra had gone on an urgent trip. So the weeks passed. And all that time, fear didn't leave her. Every movement outside the window seemed suspicious, every phone ring, potentially fatal. Matias tried to comfort her, assuring her that they would soon find a safe place. Irene and Jose busied themselves arranging new identities and a possible relocation to some distant place. Alejandra often wondered, if we're meant to live like this, always running, will it ever end? She also noticed that Irene was becoming increasingly irritable. Apparently, she had unresolved issues with Matias. After all, their original plan had unraveled once Alejandra reappeared. Tensions were growing. One day, in a rented apartment they had just moved into, Irene received a phone call. She stepped into another room to answer, then returned and said, "We need to leave. Now. I think we've been found." Matias and Jose exchanged glances and packed within 30 minutes. Alejandra, exhausted, pulled herself together. As they exited the building, a strange man appeared from the opposite side of the street, walking toward them with determination. Jose ordered everyone into the car and stepped forward, pulling out a gun. The man raised his hands. "Easy. I'm from a friend, I have information." But he looked too confident, and Alejandra's heart skipped. What if it's a trap? But when the man saw the weapon aimed at him, he said calmly, "I'm from Rafael. He says the deal to sell the compromising materials can be done safely if you do it in the right place. He knows a middleman who's ready to buy it all and help you disappear for good. Your enemies won't chase you anymore. All they want is the money and the documents." Matias tensed. "Rafael's alive?" "Yes, and he wants to make some money. He's offering to handle the exchange. You hand over the files, he pays a large sum and helps you vanish from the radar." Irene flared up. "We don't believe it. This could be a setup." The man shrugged. "Think what you want. I've delivered Rafael's message." When he left, they all looked at each other. Matias turned to Alejandra. "Sandra, do you still have the flash drive? Maybe this is our way out, if we sell the files and get out of the game." Alejandra hesitated. "But it's a risk. If the deal goes wrong, we'll be killed." Jose frowned. "Or we'll be running for the rest of our lives." The argument dragged on. In the end, Matias realized they had no other viable option. Irene was furious, terrified of a trap, but Matias was ready to take the risk. "We're not in a position to negotiate. If there's a chance to end this through a middleman, we have to try," he said. Alejandra, still uncertain, agreed. She didn't want to spend the rest of her life afraid. They arranged to meet in a neutral, public location, in a busy cafe in a large city, so the gang couldn't quietly take them out. Jose got them new clothes to help them blend in. At the appointed hour, like characters in a spy movie, they took a table deep in the cafe among ordinary customers. Then Rafael arrived, and Alejandra immediately recognized him as the same man with the bruised cheek, though now he looked calmer, less threatening. He sat down, ordered a coffee, and acted like a casual acquaintance. Then he said quietly, "So, are you ready?" Rafael asked calmly. "I've found someone who's willing to buy all the materials and offer you protection if the files are genuine. Once he has everything, your names are off the radar. No one will chase you anymore. He has every reason to keep things quiet." Matias answered hoarsely, "And what if we're being set up?" Rafael raised an eyebrow. "Then you've got nothing left to lose. They're already after you. But I'm vouching for this guy, he's serious. He wants to use the intel for his own business. We make money, you get freedom. Everyone wins." Under the table, Alejandra squeezed Matias's hand. He took a deep breath. "Fine. But we do this on our terms. He gives half the money up front, then gets a portion of the files for verification. If everything checks out, we get the rest of the money, and only then do we hand over the remaining data. Once the funds are in our account, we vanish." Rafael smirked. Details can be settled at the meeting. It's set for tomorrow. Just no tricks. If you try to screw us, it's over. But if it goes smoothly, we walk away as friends." He finished his coffee, stood up, and left. Everyone exchanged glances. Irene sighed nervously. "We'll have to trust him." Jose said nothing. Alejandra, holding back her fear, asked Matias, "Do you think this will work?" He replied wearily, "I don't know. But we have no other choice." The day of the deal arrived. They chose a public location, a large shopping mall, but agreed to meet in a specific closed pavilion to avoid attracting a crowd. There, in one of the vacant spaces, Rafael arrived with his contact, a stern-looking man in his 40s who introduced himself as Fernando, though it was likely a fake name. Alejandra held the flash drive and a laptop. Matias was tense. Irene and Jose stayed back, watching everything. Fernando inspected a folder of printed documents and browsed a few files on the laptop. "The authenticity looks solid," he said. "I'm interested. Ready to pay." He nodded to his assistant, who opened a briefcase filled with cash. "Here's the first half." Matias quickly counted the bills, checked the watermarks. Rafael stood beside him, eyes half shut. "It's legit," he rasped. Matias handed over another flash drive containing a starter set of files. Fernando checked them and smirked. "All right. Let's finish it. You'll get the second half once I have the rest." Alejandra looked at Matias. He nodded. "Do it." Trying not to let her hands shake, she pulled out the main flash drive. Matias had entrusted it to her that morning. But suddenly, shouting erupted outside, followed by the sound of rushing feet. Everyone flinched, and the next second, armed men in black stormed the room, automatic weapons raised. Rafael jumped back. Fernando drew a pistol. Chaos exploded. Irene and Jose dove against the wall. Matias threw himself in front of Alejandra to shield her. Shouts rang out. "Get down! Hands up!" It was a tactical squad, possibly police, though they wore no insignia. Rafael made a dash for the exit but was shot in the leg and collapsed, screaming. Fernando dropped the briefcase and opened fire, wounding one of the men in black. In return, he was tackled, a bullet knocking him down. Matias and Alejandra hugged the wall, unsure what would happen next. Then more men in actual police uniforms stormed in, yelling commands. A full-blown shootout erupted, screaming, gunfire, weapons hitting the floor, people falling wounded. Irene and Jose crouched in fear, shielding themselves. Alejandra clutched the flash drive in both hands, eyes wide with terror. Matias pressed her against the wall, protecting her with his body. It was complete madness. Finally, the smoke began to clear. The armed men wrestled Fernando to the floor. He was bleeding out. Rafael groaned nearby. Fernando's assistant had been knocked out. The whole deal had collapsed into disaster. It seemed the squad in black and the police were conducting a joint operation. Matias, Alejandra, Irene, and Jose were pinned against the wall, shouted at from all sides. Some barked, face down, everyone, others, hands behind your head. They realized they had been caught in the crossfire of a full-scale raid. Alejandra glanced at Matias, who whispered through clenched teeth, "I'm sorry." It seemed like the end, they would either be arrested or shot. But suddenly, the door burst open again, and another group of armed men stormed in, arguing with the first. One seemed to be a special unit, the other, possibly local police. A shouting match broke out, who had jurisdiction, who was leading the operation. Jose seized the chaos. He grabbed a gun, kicked open a side door, and shouted, "Go!" He and Irene darted out, disappearing into the panicked crowd of mall-goers fleeing the scene. Matias grabbed Alejandra's hand, pulling her behind him, but two black-clad officers charged toward them. Matias shoved one aside. He fell, giving Alejandra enough time to sprint down a corridor. Gunfire cracked in the air. Screams echoed. Mall security had no idea what was happening. Through the smoke and panic, Alejandra stumbled forward. Matias's hand gripped hers tightly. They burst through an emergency exit, running across the vestibule toward the parking lot. But they had no car. Irene and Jose were gone, maybe already driving off. Sirens wailed everywhere. Screams. Blurs of motion. Then Alejandra noticed Matias was limping, clutching his side. "You're hurt?" she cried in desperation. Matias gasped, "Just a graze. Not fatal." But his clothes were stained with blood. He was weakening. They stumbled into the parking lot. Chaos reigned, cars pulling out, swerving, honking. Matias collapsed against the wall, too weak to go on. If they're caught now, it's over, Alejandra thought. A woman ran up, just a civilian, maybe a driver, looking terrified. "What happened?" she asked. Alejandra, desperate and pretending it was a robbery, pleaded. "Please help us. We need a hospital, please, I'm begging you." The woman hesitated, but finally relented. She unlocked the car and helped them push Matias into the back seat. Alejandra climbed in beside him. The woman hit the gas, panicking as more uniformed figures spilled out of the building behind them, shouting. But no one fired, too many civilians around. Speeding through the street, sirens still echoing, the woman swerved into an alleyway to avoid pursuit. "Where am I taking you?" she asked breathlessly. Alejandra's thoughts raced. They couldn't go to a hospital, they'd be found immediately. "Please, just anywhere far from here," she begged. The woman, clearly frightened but seeing no better option, drove toward the industrial outskirts. Matias moaned. Blood soaked through his shirt. Alejandra pressed her scarf to the wound, her hands trembling. Somehow, the flash drive fell from her bag. She snatched it up, heart pounding. Everything, this entire nightmare, was because of this. Finally, the woman stopped. "I can't go any farther. I have kids. Call someone. Find help." Alejandra knew that was the end of her help. She thanked the woman, then, with difficulty, pulled Matias from the car. He staggered, face pale. They stood amid derelict buildings and shuttered warehouses. The car sped off, leaving them in silence. "Stay with me, Matias," Alejandra cried, trying to hold him up. He was gasping for breath, bleeding, but conscious. "I'm okay, just don't leave me," he whispered. Fighting off panic, Alejandra scanned the area. If she didn't get help soon, he could bleed out. But the police and the gang were surely searching for them. Then she remembered the underground doctor who had helped them after Matias's first escape. Could she call him? Her phone was dead, after all the calls. She fumbled in her bag, found a power bank, and plugged it in. As it powered on, Matias started to lose consciousness. "No, don't you dare die on me," she sobbed. Finally, the signal returned. She called the doctor, tears streaming, begging him to come. Miraculously, he agreed, though he cursed the situation and warned her this criminal mess could end in disaster. The wait felt eternal. Matias lay slumped against a building wall. Alejandra shielded him from the wind, pressing cloth hard to the wound, trembling, willing him to live. "Forgive me for dragging you into this. I just wanted to protect you," Matias murmured, barely conscious. Alejandra watched as his eyelids fluttered closed, tears streaming down her face. "Don't die. Please. I can't survive losing you a second time." After what felt like an eternity, the familiar doctor arrived in a shabby car. He examined Matias and said they couldn't go to a hospital, it was too risky, but they could treat him at his apartment. Alejandra helped get Matias into the car, and they drove off. At the apartment, the doctor numbed the wound, disinfected it, and extracted the bullet. Thankfully, it had passed through muscle tissue without hitting any vital organs. Matias remained conscious, though weak. For several days, he lay in what had become an improvised hospital bed, while Alejandra stayed by his side without leaving, ready to fight off any danger. All of it, the chaos, the bloodshed, had revolved around that flash drive. And now it was still with Alejandra. But what did it mean anymore? The deal had collapsed. The gang knew they were alive. The police were hunting them. So were intelligence operatives. Irene and Jose had vanished, taking a chunk of the cash. Rafael was either wounded or under arrest. Fernando's fate was unknown. It was total chaos. Alejandra feared stepping outside. Matias needed time to recover. The doctor, though helpful, repeatedly reminded them that harboring fugitives was dangerous, and eventually, someone would track them down. "What are we supposed to do now, Matias?" Alejandro whispered when he was well enough to sit up. His eyes were dark with despair. "Sandra, I don't know. Maybe we run again. Maybe we disappear. But I see what this is doing to you. You're at your limit." He squeezed her hand. Alejandra felt shattered, exhausted, scared. "I'm ready to keep running if it means I'm with you." "But where? Where can we go?" she asked through tears. On the 5th day, the answer came in the worst way. Men in civilian clothes showed up at the doctor's door. Likely intelligence officers. The frightened doctor opened up to avoid trouble. They told Matias and Alejandra plainly they knew where they were hiding. They had grounds to arrest Matias, but they were offering a deal instead. "You give us all the materials," one said flatly, "and we close the case. We'll give you new identities. But you must leave this country for good. No return. No noise." Alejandra recoiled. "Why don't you just arrest us?" The man shrugged. "Why bother? This is a sensitive matter. Powerful people are involved. We don't want it blowing up. You're not important, just disappear. But if you try to negotiate, it could get ugly." Matias stared at them with quiet rage. So, even the state wanted to bury the truth. Still, it was a path to survival. Alejandra locked eyes with him. "What are we going to do?" Matias shook his head slowly. "I don't have the strength to fight anymore. They want to cover their tracks, let them. If it keeps you alive, Sandra, I'll do it." The agent added coolly. "You have 24 hours. We'll be back for your answer. If you refuse, we'll take you both in, and you may not come out alive." Then they left. Alone again, Matias took Alejandra's hands in his. "Sandra, the choice is yours now. The flash drive is with you. If we give it up, we'll live in hiding, but with their help. If we don't, we'll be destroyed." Alejandra, trembling with desperation, nodded slowly. "Let's do it. I can't take this anymore. I just want us to live." But deep down, she mourned the idea of justice. The data they carried could have brought down a criminal empire. It could have exposed rot at the highest levels. But reality left her with only one choice: life. Her life and his. The next day, the plainclothes agents returned. Alejandra, without saying a word, handed them the flash drive. They checked its contents, then handed her an envelope, fake passports, plane tickets, and forged documents for a country where they wouldn't be pursued. With a shrug, one of them said, "Here. You fly out tonight. Consider yourselves lucky. We hope we never see you again." Alejandra and Matias didn't fully believe it. They feared they'd be gunned down at the airport or intercepted at the gate. But it seemed these men truly wanted to bury the entire affair. The doctor helped Matias wrap his wound so he could walk. They packed only the bare essentials and made their way to the airport, every step weighted by fear that it might be their last. But everything went smoothly. They passed security with their new identities and boarded the flight. When the flight attendant announced takeoff, Alejandra gripped Matias's hand. At that moment, it felt like a lifetime had passed since the day she saw him on the bus and thought he was a ghost. Did we actually survive? She wondered, staring out the window at the receding city lights. Matias looked at her and whispered, "Forgive me. And thank you for not giving up on me." I love you, Sandra. And although a storm of pain still lingered inside her from all the lies and disappearances, she replied, I love you too. And maybe someday we'll have a chance to come back if we want to. But for now, this is what it is. The plane ascended toward a new land, while her thoughts swirled with images of the parents she left behind, still in the dark, her mother in the hospital bed, her father searching for his daughter, her friend Marta. Yet beside her, her husband was alive. That meant there was still hope. In saving Matias and herself, Alejandra had lost the life she once knew, but gained a second chance at another. And maybe, someday, years from now, she would find a way to explain everything to her loved ones. To tell them she hadn't died. That through it all, her love had been stronger than fear, stronger than guilt, stronger even than the criminal network that had tried to tear them apart. For now, the unknown awaited them in a foreign land, where they would have to build from nothing. But at least they would do it together. Maybe one day, fate would grant them the chance to return and reclaim the bonds they'd lost, once the danger had truly passed. Watching Matias sleep beside her on the plane, Alejandra felt that despite everything, the fear, the blood, the betrayal, she had followed her heart. And though the road ahead would be uncertain and full of obstacles, she would carry that truth with her. This hadn't been in vain. One day, they would pay their debts to the world and to their families. One day, they would tell the whole story. But now they were alive. Together. Matias remained a ghost to the city, to their neighbors, to the officials who still believed him dead. And perhaps that was safer for everyone. Only at the end of this harrowing journey did Alejandra fully understand the truth. Matias had vanished out of love, fear, and the tangled mess of a criminal web that nearly destroyed them both. Fate had brought them together again on a knife's edge, and love had saved them. That was the only answer that mattered now. And so, the future stretched before them in silence and starlight. The plane's engine hummed softly. Her husband slept, exhausted. Alejandra looked out at the scattered stars and whispered to herself, there's no end in sight. But we're alive. And we're together. In that whisper lay all the pain, the love, and the fragile hope she refused to let go.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.